What a gorgeous day it is. Chamber of Commerce Day, as they say. Watching the players come down the 18th fairway, hitting their approach shots into the 18th green. Unfortunately, there's a scoreboard that's blocking my view between here and the 18th green. But I can tell by the body English reaction after the follow-through whether or not the players have hit what they feel like was a good, acceptable shot for them. But joining us now is Lucien Smith, former GOP chairman, attorney with Balch Bingham. Thanks for coming on, Lucien.
Oh, absolutely. It's great to be with you, Gerard.
Yeah. I know it was a little late notice, but I said, well, heck, Lucien lives close by, and he's a member here. He's involved with Century Club Charities. We ought to get him on out, talk a little golf, maybe even work in a little politics.
Oh, look, I was for it. When Alex texted me, I thought, I'm going to be at the tournament regardless. So I'm happy to swing by. And to your point, it really is just the best weather I think we've had for this tournament. I mean, people – I was saying this to Alex, who books for the show when we were off the air, that even if you don't like golf, if you like golf, right, you ought to be here. Even if you don't like golf, unless you just hate being outside,
that's right,
you should come to the tournament because the weather is great, the course looks beautiful, the parking setup where they bring you in on a shuttle to the entrance is so easy, and
yes,
I think it's $30 to buy a ticket for it for a day. So if you're in Central Mississippi and you like the outdoors or sports, especially if you like golf, people ought to come out here.
Yeah, and come on out and see us. We're under the tent here along the 18th fairway, about middle way up the fairway, where the players generally hit their drives. This is such a great event, Lucien, for the city of Jackson, the Central Mississippi community, but the state of Mississippi, but most importantly, the money that's raised for over 60 charities, according to Philip Carpenter, with the Century Club Charity Board President, and also talking to Guy Gishke earlier. He's the CEO of Children's of Mississippi, which I believe is the largest benefactor of the funds that are raised here. It's just a great cause. And the PGA is all about doing good for the communities. I mean, it really is a traveling show that really raises money for charities. And they play golf, by the way, while they're at it.
No, that's exactly right. And each of these PGA Tour events are separate charitable entities that put on the tournament that the players come and play at, and it does contribute a ton of, as you've discussed with guests today, and have been done on the other shows. I mean, it puts a lot of money into various charities, but it also just puts a lot of money into the economy. The people you bring in who are staying at hotels here, who are renting houses, who are eating in restaurants, and participating in this. And one thing I think about, folks in Mississippi, and I'm guilty of this, folks in Jackson, and I'm guilty of this too, we love to complain about things we don't have.
Yeah,
we love to say, Mississippi doesn't, I was in Nashville and they've got this. I was in Atlanta and they've got this. We've got a PGA Tour event. I mean, people fly around the country to watch the best golfers in the world play, and you can literally drive down County Line, park at North Park, get on a bus, and come watch some of the absolute best golfers in the world play right here, and people ought to do it. And one other thing I'll say, Gerard, I think a lot of people, and I was like this at one point, are kind of intimidated at coming to a golf tournament because, we've all been to a football game. We've all been to a baseball game. What do you do at a golf tournament?
Yeah.
And, for people who aren't familiar with it, there are massive walkways that are set up all around the tournament. So you can start with a golfer at the very first tee and walk with him until he finishes on an 18, or you can just walk and find a hole you think is pretty or a shot you think is tough and watch people there the entire day. And there are great opportunities for food and drink all along the course. And so it really is, for $30, a great way to spend, 2 hours or 8 hours if you want to spend a whole day out here.
And I got to tell you, having experienced what certainly felt like the wettest dang August in early September, I can remember just being out here in the sunshine and the cool temperatures, to me, is worth it. It doesn't matter where you are. So might as well come on out here and enjoy the beautiful weather.
That's right. Well, like you said, I live not far from here, and so I came out on Wednesday for the Pro-Am, and I kept running into friends who were playing in the Pro-Am, and they're like, what are you doing out here? Did you play this morning? I said, no, it's just gorgeous, and I'd rather be out here than somewhere else. So hopefully I returned all my phone calls and nobody's listening saying, that's why the guy didn't call me back on Wednesday.
No, that's awesome. So one thing for sure, we've been talking this morning about this devastating Hurricane Ian, that just ravaged, I should say, through the western coast of Florida and then across the peninsula, and now turning northward and about to lash, it looks like North Carolina, South Carolina, up the East Coast. You seen the images, the photos,
it's just
video?
devastating.
It's incredible.
And nobody knows
incredible.
that. I mean, we Mississippi folks know that kind of hurricane as well as anybody, and it's devastating.
You know, something that comes to mind as well, Lucien, is we spend a lot of time on this program and just in our political domain, our political realm in general. We lash out. We take jabs. We take shots at others across the aisle in particular. We don't really do a whole lot together anymore. And it's kind of sad. We've kind of gotten in our corners, and we're just throwing stones across the ring there. But this does appear to be a situation where we've got a Republican governor, a prospective candidate in 2024 for president. We've got a Democrat president, and we've got the various agencies underneath their purviews or over which they're responsible. It seems like they're getting along pretty well.
Well, and you have to during one of these situations. I mean, this is a moment where you really have to hang the politics up and focus on doing the right thing at every level. And you can go back to different storms and point to Democrats who made bad decisions, Republicans who made bad decisions, but this is a moment where you've got to take care of people who are in need, and this really is a core function of government. I mean, we spend so much time doing these things that government ought to absolutely not do, but taking care of people after a disaster is something the government needs to be doing. It needs to be doing it in the right way, and the right way to do it is to work together, not sit there trying to figure out how you can score political points, because more so than I think any other sort of governmental political thing that happens, if you sit there fighting about politics in a disaster, people are going to suffer, and you need to do what you have to do as a leader to make sure as best you can that those people get the resources they need, they're able to get back on their feet, they're able to rebuild, they're first able to recover, and then you're able to rebuild, and that takes some non-political cooperation.
And that's a good point, because while the conflict ensues, people are hurting. That's the bottom line. And so maybe there's some down the road potential political gain from the conflict itself. And that's one of the things I've been talking about this morning and touched on a bit yesterday to get you to respond to. I haven't seen any on the Republican side, but I've seen on the Democrat side. We talked about Amy Klobuchar, who basically said, gee, I hope all these people see that you need to be voting for Democrats in the midterms, because we're the only ones serious about addressing climate change. And, of course, this is a day after the storm hits, which clearly was taking a shot at the Republicans and their lack of support for this recent Inflation Reduction Act. And then we've got others out there as well in the political realm on the Democrat side that are talking about climate change and why you need to be voting for Democrats. Perhaps the most egregious case that we shared earlier, Rhino and I did, was Joy Reid over there at MSNBC. Now, before we came on, you said you wouldn't be surprised at anything she said, and we aren't either. But I thought that was the worst when she compared those who were trying to escape the wrath of the hurricane on the western coast of Florida, just moving inland. She compared those to the immigrants crossing the border that are trying to escape oppression in their respective countries. I mean, is that the proper time and place to do that?
Not at all. I mean, and let me say this. I mean, you know, on a matrix, you've got the people who are very far left and very smart. You've got the conservatives who are very conservative but not very smart. Conservatives who are very smart and very conservative. Joy Reid's in that upper left part of the matrix where she's not very smart and is very liberal. So I'm not at all surprised by that. But it's sort of, I mean, it's the old Rahm Emanuel quote, right? Like, you never let a crisis go to waste. And so if there's a shooting, they're going to push their extremist agenda on guns. If there's a weather event, they're going to say, this is the reason we've got to have billions of dollars worth of subsidies for our preferred technology. But the other thing it speaks to, this comment that there's some analogy there, and it's one of the things I've heard people explain of this rise of populism and why Donald Trump and others in that mold have been so popular. There's really a division in this country, I think, between people who live in the heartland, either literally or culturally, who view national borders as a real thing, and people like Joy Reid, who are, in a very literal sense, citizens of the world. I mean, people who make so much money that they may summer this summer in London. They go to conferences in Switzerland, and there's nothing wrong inherently with any of that. I mean, London's a great place. I'm sure Switzerland's a great place to go to a conference, but at the end of the day, we recognize, you and I do, that there are borders, that they're real things, that countries are, they mean something other than this abstract idea. But I think to somebody like Joy Reid, the difference between people who have been ravaged by a storm in western Florida going to a different state, there's no meaningful difference to her.
I don't get it.
Between that and somebody who's crossing a national border. And that to me is just absurd.
It's unbelievable. We got Lucien Smith here, former chairman of the GOP, attorney with Balch Bingham. We're going to step aside right here. We're at the Country Club of Jackson for the Sanderson Farms Championship. Lucian's going to stay with us through the next segment. The pros coming down the 18th fairway, we could see them hitting their drives out in the middle. Most of them, that is. That's why they're pros. And then they hit those approach shots up to the 18th green. It's a little uphill. The 18th green surrounded by lots of the suites. Really beautiful day, great venue, well organized and conducted tournament out here. It's really such an asset, I think, for the state of Mississippi. Lucien Smith is our guest here at the Country Club of Jackson. So, the politics, we were just talking about that, Lucien, being injected into this catastrophic event. And now it's a hurricane. You mentioned shootings, of course, always raise the discussion of gun control. That always comes up. Mm-hmm. And who knows what the heck else, but you also referred to Rahm Emanuel, who said never let a crisis go to waste. It seems like that a lot of the Democrats have sort of taken heed to that advice.
They do it much more than we do, and I think it's a shame, and you and I have talked about this before. I mean, I am a very conservative Republican. I'm going to vote Republican, unless there's a Republican so bad that I got to skip that line. I mean, I'm a conservative Republican, but it feels like over the last 20 years, it's happened even more in the last 10 years. And I think it's happened, gradually over time. We've inserted politics into basically everything. Where you've got to decide, every musician, every actor's got to give their political views. And if they're silent, they get shamed for doing it. Every corporation over here has got to have this political point of view, and I think it's in the long term. I think it's going to be bad for a lot of those corporations because I think people are going to say, just to give one example, I quit subscribing to Harry's Razors after they dropped the Daily Wire as they stopped one of their advertisers.
Right.
Because I just thought if somebody is going to openly express how much they hate what I believe, I don't know that I want to give you $12 every month.
And that's the great thing about the freedom that we are privileged to have in this country. Go choose another one. You know.
But I wish we could get away from it altogether.
I do too.
Because I think from the consumer point of view, I don't want to buy Republican water or Democratic water. I just want whatever the good cheap water is.
Yeah.
And that there's just so much of that everywhere, and I don't think it's good for the country. I don't think it's the worst thing that's ever happened, but I certainly don't think it's something that we ought to keep having happen.
Well, the bigger issue to me, honestly, Lucien, is the way that this is permeating our society, not in the private sector, but in the public sector, the agencies, our military, et cetera. I start wondering, well, what about your core mission? If your mission in the military, honestly, is to protect the nation and protect us from bad guys, and sometimes you have to go to war to do that. Well, how can you be best prepared to do that when you're spending all your time going through all this crazy social justice training?
I think that's right.
And the same thing with a private company.
Well,
it's hard enough to make a living when you're trying to produce products and services the market will respond to positively. When you introduce all this other sort of social training into the environment, how do you have time?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's especially true when you start talking about the military. I mean, we're not going to defeat the enemies of the U.S. by making sure we get the right pronouns on the folks on the other side of it. I mean, I think a lot of times for business, it's kind of performative. I mean, it's almost a sales thing, right? They're able to say they change their Twitter handle to whatever whatever happens to be the thing you're supposed to do that day or that month, and as a result, they're able to they try to use it to sell more product.
But to a great extent, I think it fits aligns with the Democrat philosophy and playbook. They like to divide people into groups. I mean, that's a core function and element of Marxism. honestly. And I know sometimes the people on the left will say, well, you're just being radical and using Marxism, too frequently, too flippantly. Well, that's what we've been hearing, the word fascism. I've talked about that on the program the last week. They're just using that on a regular, everything's fascist. If you are pro-life, well, you're a fascist.
Right.
If you want people to show their voter ID to verify and confirm that they're eligible and legal to vote, well, you're a fascist. So.
Well, and yes, that's right. Fascism has become a word that means a conservative I don't like, which increasingly the left uses. Fascist is getting thrown at basically everybody. The prime minister who was elected in Italy, I'm told, is a neo-fascist. Now, I don't know her a whole lot. I've watched the one speech she gave where she talked about how important the family was.
I read it.
She was going to fight against.
Yeah.
Let me be clear. I watched her give it and read it. I didn't understand what she was saying.
Because she was speaking in her native Italian language.
But none of that struck me as being what I would think of as fascism.
I agree. God, family, country. That's fascist.
Right.
That's oppressive.
That's right.
Mean, it's the end of democracy, God, family, country.
Well, that's the end of the democracy stuff is the stuff that I think so dangerous. You keep hearing, the Republicans are against democracy, and the solution from the Democrats seems to be to stop letting them get elected. So that's how we're going to save democracy, by ending it. So.
Well, if you can't kill your baby in the womb up until the end of the third trimester, it's the end of democracy.
It's the end of democracy. That's right. That's exactly right.
Lucien Smith has been our guest. Appreciate it, Lucien, for coming on.
Great to be with you, Gerard. Thank you.
Beautiful weather. Have fun out there. We're going to take a break. We got SuperTalk News, Fox News coming your way. We're at the Country Club of Jackson. After the break, we've got Representative Lee Yancey out here at the Country Club.
My cousin.
Your cousin?
My cousin Lee Yancey.
How about that? We're coming